I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to post on Reddit about my past, but here I am. For 6 years, I buried this story, convinced I had moved on. And I had. Mostly. But life has a way of dragging old ghosts back to the surface when you least expect it. Maybe sharing this will finally put them to rest. So here it is. The time my ex-fiancée slept with my stepbrother the night before our wedding, and 6 years later, just weeks before I was about to marry someone else, she came back. My name's Ethan. I'm 30 now, living in Chicago, but back then, I was in Austin. At 23, I was already running my own contracting business, nothing huge, but enough to make a name for myself. I worked hard, kept my head down, and planned for the future. And Rachel? She was my future. We met in high school. She was the kind of girl people gravitated toward. Charming, confident, the life of any room she walked into. I wasn't the loudest guy, but with her, I never had to be. We balanced each other out. For 7 years, we built a life together, talked about the future, shared stupid inside jokes that made no sense to anyone but us. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew us. Then there was Jake, my stepbrother. 2 years younger, a pain in the ass from the day our parents got married when I was 12. Jake had always been reckless. Fights, DUIs, half-baked schemes that never worked out. We tolerated each other because we had to, but we were never close. Then, when Rachel and I got engaged, he started coming around more. At first, I didn't think much of it. He cracked jokes about how lucky I was, made over-the-top compliments about Rachel's cooking at family dinners. Harmless, right? Except then he started dropping by unannounced. I'd come home from work to find him on our couch, feet up, making himself at home. He'd steer every conversation back to himself, talking about crazy trips, fights he got into, bullshit about living life on the edge. And Rachel? She humored him. She'd laugh, shake her head, tell me later, "Your brother's a lot, huh?" But sometimes I caught things. Small things. The way Jake's eyes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't looking. The way Rachel defended him when I got annoyed. The way he joked, half smirking, "If you ever screw up, I'm next in line." I should have trusted my gut, but I didn't, because I trusted her. The night before our wedding, we agreed to stay in separate hotels. Rachel said it was for tradition, that it would make seeing each other at the altar more special. I wasn't big on superstition, but she was insistent, so I went along with it. That night, I was with my groomsmen, having a few drinks, talking about how tomorrow would be the best day of my life. I was nervous, but the good kind. The kind that made my hands twitch in anticipation, that had me replaying our vows in my head. Then I realized, I forgot them. I'd written them on special stationery Rachel picked out and left them in her bag earlier that day. I shot her a text. No response. Probably asleep, I figured. So I drove to her hotel. The guy at the front desk hesitated before handing me a key to her room. Maybe I should have picked up on that too. Room 308. I remember walking down the hall, thinking how funny it would be if I caught her watching some dumb rom-com in bed, stuffing her face with snacks. I opened the door. Rachel was in bed. With Jake. They weren't just there. They were laughing. That's what stuck with me the most. Not just the betrayal. Not just the fact that it was Jake, of all people, but that they weren't caught in some shameful moment. They were enjoying it. Rachel's face went pale the second she saw me. Her mouth opened and closed, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Jake? He smirked. That same smug, punchable grin I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The one that said, "Yeah, I did this." And what? I didn't say a word. I turned. Walked out. I don't remember the drive back to my hotel, just that my hands were shaking, my stomach felt hollow, and my mind kept replaying that damn laughter like a broken record. By the time I got to my room, my phone was already buzzing. Rachel, Ethan, please, let me explain. Rachel, it's not what it looks like. Rachel, I made a mistake. I don't know what came over me. I didn't respond. The next morning, I called off the wedding. My dad lost his mind when he found out. My stepmom? She disowned Jake on the spot, told him not to bother coming home. A week later, he packed up and moved to Miami. Rachel? She tried everything. Texts, calls, emails, even showing up at my apartment. Every message was some variation of, "I was scared," I don't know why I did it. I love you. But I didn't love her. Not anymore. So I left, packed up my life, and moved to Chicago. For years, I threw myself into work, building my company, making sure I never had time to think about her. And then I met Lauren. She wasn't like Rachel. No games, no bullshit. She was sharp, confident, a lawyer who could tear someone apart in court without breaking a sweat. The first time I saw her in action, I couldn't stop grinning. I asked her out that same week. 3 years later, we were engaged. I had moved on, found something better, something real. Then, 2 weeks before our wedding, Rachel messaged me. I didn't even realize she had an Instagram. Her profile was filled with old photos of us, vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, like she was trying to freeze time. Her message was simple. Ethan, I heard about your wedding. I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. After 6 years, after everything, she still had the audacity. I showed Lauren. She read it, raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously considering responding, right? I wasn't sure. I told myself I was over it, that I didn't care. But something about Rachel's message, it pissed me off in a way I hadn't felt in years. So I messaged her back. What do you want? Her reply came instantly. I need to see you. Please. Just one conversation. It's important. Important? Now it was important? Lauren and I talked it over. She knew everything about Rachel, everything about that night. And she had an idea. If Rachel wanted to talk, fine. But it would be on our terms. And we were going to make sure she never forgot it. I didn't sleep much that night. Rachel's message kept replaying in my head. I need to see you. Please. Just one conversation. It's important. What the hell could she possibly have to say now? Lauren stretched out beside me, scrolling on her phone, acting completely unbothered. But I knew her. She was watching me, waiting for me to say something. After what felt like an hour of staring at the ceiling, I finally turned to her. You really think this is a good idea? She didn't look up. I think it's a bad idea for you to let this eat at you for another 6 years. She had a point. By morning, we had a plan. If Rachel wanted to talk, I'd let her, but I wasn't meeting her alone. And I damn sure wasn't giving her the satisfaction of thinking she had any power over me. Lauren pulled out all the stops. She booked a private corner at a bar downtown. The kind of place that was casual enough not to feel like a setup, but secluded enough that we could control the situation. Then, we took it up a notch. Trevor, Alex, and Marcus, my groomsmen, were all in the group chat within minutes. Dude, Trevor texted. If she wants to drag you back into her bullshit, we might as well make it memorable. What are you thinking? I asked. He sent a screenshot of a custom cake order. Bright red icing, big cursive letters. Congrats, Rachel and Jake. I actually laughed. That's fucked up. That's the point, he shot back. We ran with it. Lauren printed fake wedding invitations with Rachel and Jake's names on them. We got a small speaker and loaded it with an old voice recording of Jake's obnoxious laugh. By the time everything was set, I almost couldn't wait to see her reaction. When the day came, I arrived early. The bar was dimly lit, filled with the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses. The private booth was already set, cake in place, fake invitations scattered on the table. Lauren leaned against the bar with a drink in her hand, watching the setup like some evil mastermind. Then, Rachel walked in. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Not in a dramatic way, but enough that it caught me off guard. Her hair was darker, pulled back in a low ponytail like she hadn't bothered to style it. There were faint lines around her eyes, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights. And the biggest difference? The confidence she used to carry, the thing that made her so magnetic, was gone. She spotted me immediately, her eyes widening just slightly. For a second, it almost looked like she was going to turn around and walk out. But she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and walked toward me. Ethan, she said softly, like my name physically hurt to say. I didn't respond, just gestured for her to sit. She hesitated before lowering herself into the seat across from me. I didn't think you'd come, she admitted. I leaned back. Then why'd you ask? Rachel's gaze flickered to the table, taking in the cake, the invitations, the setup. Her face paled. What is this? Trevor, sitting beside me, grinned. Oh, just a little celebration. Thought you'd appreciate the nostalgia. She swallowed hard. Her fingers curled against the table like she was bracing herself. Ethan, she started, voice shaking slightly. I didn't come here to fight. I need to tell you something. I stared at her, waiting. Rachel took another breath, but it didn't seem to steady her. Then, finally, she said it. Jake's in prison. For a second, I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. I blinked. What? She nodded, looking down at her hands. It happened 2 years ago. Some business deal went bad. He got caught up in fraud. Thought he was smarter than everyone else, but he got sloppy. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, relief, maybe even pity. But all I felt was a dull sense of inevitability. Of course, Jake ended up in prison. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. That's what you wanted to tell me? Rachel hesitated. No. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, and when she looked up, I saw it. Something deeper. Something worse. Regret. Shame. Fear. There's more, she whispered. I didn't say anything. Just waited. Rachel licked her lips, hesitating again. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I was pregnant. Everything around me went still. The noise of the bar faded. The warmth of the drink in my hand disappeared. My body locked up. I stared at her. What? Rachel's hands trembled slightly. Before the wedding. I found out a few weeks before everything happened. I didn't tell you because I was scared. And then after that night, I didn't know what to do. A sick feeling crawled up my spine. I forced myself to ask, was it mine? Rachel's lips parted, but no words came out. That hesitation? That was all the answer I needed. My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Who? Her fingers tightened around the hem of her sleeve. Ethan, Who? She exhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath. It doesn't matter. I let out a bitter laugh. It doesn't matter? Rachel shook her head, her eyes glistening. I didn't know until after. I thought it could be yours. And then when I found out the truth, it was already too late to tell you. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Rachel's eyes widened. Ethan, please. No, my voice was ice. You don't get to drop this on me like it's some confession in a church and expect me to care. Lauren stepped forward then, placing a hand on my arm. Not to stop me, just to remind me she was there. That I didn't have to deal with this alone. Rachel's gaze flicked to Lauren, then back to me. And for the first time that night, her face cracked. You moved on, she whispered, like she was just realizing it now. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. Yeah, I did. Rachel swallowed hard. She glanced at the cake again. The joke, the mockery of what could have been. Then, without another word, she got up and walked away. I didn't stop her, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing at all. Rachel never reached out again after that night. No texts, no cryptic messages, no unexpected visits, just nothing. And for a while, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, because that's who Rachel had always been, someone who never truly let go, even when she should have. But this time, she was gone. I told myself I should feel relief, and part of me did. But another part, the one that spent years trying to understand why she did what she did, felt something closer to emptiness, like standing in the middle of a storm, waiting for the thunder, only to realize the silence had swallowed everything whole. It was over. So why the hell did it still feel like she was haunting me? A week later, I was in my office late, finishing up some paperwork, when my phone buzzed. I half expected it to be Rachel, but it was Lauren. Lauren, you good? I exhaled. She always knew when I was stuck in my own head. Me? Yeah. Just finishing up. Be home soon. Lauren, don't work too late. I'll save you some ice cream. I smirked, shaking my head. She knew exactly how to keep me grounded. But as I locked up the office, something gnawed at me. Rachel had left. She had finally left. So why couldn't I shake the feeling that there was still something unfinished? I didn't bring it up to Lauren right away, mostly because I knew how she'd react. She'd tell me to let it go. That Rachel was in the past, and we had a future to focus on. And she'd be right. But the thing about unfinished business? It doesn't just disappear. It lingers, like a shadow at the edge of your vision, just out of reach, but always there. And it didn't take long for it to find me again. 3 days later, I got a letter. No return address. No name. Just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. I stood in the kitchen, staring at it. Lauren walked in, holding a cup of coffee. She saw the envelope and frowned. "Who's that from?" I didn't answer right away, just turned it over in my hands. "I think it's from Rachel." Lauren went still. She set her coffee down, watching me carefully. "You gonna open it?" I hesitated. I didn't know why. Then, finally, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you'll throw it away. Maybe you'll never even open it. But if you do, just know, I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm leaving. Not just the city. Everything. I spent the last 6 years trying to fix something I didn't even understand. Trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I think I did that because it was easier than facing the fact that I broke my own life. But I see it now. I see what I did. And I see who I was when I did it. I don't like that person, Ethan. And I don't want to be her anymore. I don't expect you to believe that. You don't have to. But I wanted you to know, this time, I'm really letting go. Take care of yourself. Rachel." I read it twice. Then a third time. Lauren stood next to me, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it down on the counter. Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Well?" I exhaled, let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "She's gone." Lauren searched my face, like she was trying to read something there. And I met her eyes. And for the first time since that night 6 years ago, I smiled. Good. I thought that letter would be the end of it. And for a while it was. Rachel was gone. No more messages, no more unexpected appearances. No more ghosts lurking in the corners of my past. Life moved forward. Lauren and I settled into marriage. It was easy in a way my relationship with Rachel never had been. No second-guessing, no walking on eggshells. Just us, building something real. I stopped thinking about Rachel. Or at least, I told myself I did. But then, a month after the wedding, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was late. I had just gotten home from a long day at work, my body aching in that satisfying way it always did after a full day on site. Lauren was curled up on the couch, reading some legal brief on her tablet. She looked up when I walked in, giving me one of those soft, knowing smiles. "Long day?" I groaned, dropping onto the couch beside her. "You have no idea." She chuckled, setting her tablet aside. "Well, your food's in the oven. And yes, I saved you ice cream. God, I love this woman." I pulled her into me, pressing a kiss to her temple. "What did I do to deserve you?" She smirked. "You got really, really lucky." I laughed, about to respond, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello?" Silence. Then, "Ethan." I froze. I hadn't heard that voice in years. I stood up slowly, my grip tightening on the phone. "Jake." Lauren's eyes snapped to mine, her entire posture shifting. Alert. Jake let out a low chuckle, but there was no real amusement in it. "You sound surprised. What do you want?" My voice was sharp, colder than I intended. There was a pause. Then, "You need to hear me out." I exhaled through my nose, running a hand through my hair. "I don't need to do a damn thing, Jake. As far as I'm concerned, you're exactly where you deserve to be." Another pause. Then, quieter, almost unreadable. "You don't know the whole story." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to ask. I really didn't. But something about the way he said it, the way his voice lacked that usual arrogance, made my stomach twist. I swallowed hard. Then start talking. Jake was silent for a moment, like he was debating how much to tell me. Then he sighed. "Look, man, I didn't plan for any of that shit to happen with Rachel." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Right. Just happened to fall into my fiancé's bed the night before our wedding?" Jake hesitated. You think I was the only one? My entire body went rigid. Lauren's brow furrowed, watching me closely. I gritted my teeth. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jake exhaled. Rachel, she was never just yours, Ethan. Something inside me snapped. You don't get to rewrite history, I snarled. You think throwing her under the bus is gonna make me forgive you? That it somehow makes what you did less disgusting? Jake was quiet. Then, his voice came back, low, almost exhausted. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't give a shit what you think about me. I opened my mouth to fire back, but then he said something that made the blood drain from my face. You ever wonder why she never told you about the pregnancy? A thick, heavy silence filled the room. I could feel Lauren tense beside me. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. She did tell me. Jake let out a slow, humorless chuckle. Yeah? And what did she say? I hesitated. She said she thought it could be mine. That by the time she knew the truth, it was too late to tell me. Jake's voice was almost gentle when he spoke next. She lied, Ethan. My breath hitched. Jake let that sink in for a second before continuing. She knew the truth the whole time. The room tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. No, I whispered. That doesn't. Think about it. Jake cut in. She found out a few weeks before the wedding. If there was even a chance it was yours, don't you think she would have told you? Maybe try to fix things? I clenched my jaw. Shut up. Jake sighed. Look, I get it. You don't want to hear this. But she didn't tell you because she knew, Ethan. She knew that baby wasn't yours. And she sure as hell knew it wasn't mine. I felt sick. Lauren reached for my hand, grounding me, but I barely felt it. Then whose was it? My voice barely sounded like mine. Jake hesitated. I don't know. But I know this. Rachel didn't just cheat on you with me. My chest tightened. I didn't want to believe him. I really didn't. But deep down, some part of me already knew. Jake sighed. I gotta go. Just think about what I said. And then the line went dead. I stood there for a long time, my phone still clutched in my hand. Lauren squeezed my fingers. Ethan. I swallowed hard. I need to know. She nodded, like she had already expected me to say that. Then let's find out. And just like that, Rachel's ghost came back to life. I didn't sleep that night. Lauren didn't push me to talk. She just stayed close, running her fingers along my arm while my mind spiraled. Rachel had lied. Not just about Jake. Not just about the pregnancy. She had been hiding something bigger. And the worst part? I knew it. Somewhere deep in my gut. I had always known there was more to the story. I just never let myself look too closely. Because if I had, I would have had to admit that Rachel wasn't who I thought she was. And maybe she never had been. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Lauren set a cup of coffee in front of me, then sat down across from me, waiting. I looked at her. I need to talk to her. She didn't flinch. I figured. I hesitated. You okay with that? Lauren smirked. I married a guy who faced down his cheating ex with a cake that said, "Congrats, Rachel and Jake. I think I can handle this." I let out a breath, part frustration, part amusement. Fair. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Just don't let her pull you back in. I met her eyes. Not a chance. Rachel answered on the second ring. I half expected her to ignore my call, but maybe she had been waiting for it. She didn't say hello. Just, I was wondering when you'd call. I clenched my jaw. Why did you lie? A pause. Then a sigh. Ethan, don't bullshit me. My voice was sharp, steady. I know Jake wasn't the father. And I know you knew that before the wedding. So tell me the truth. Silence. Then, quietly, almost too softly to hear. I was protecting you. I barked out a humorless laugh. That's rich. You didn't even protect me from yourself. Rachel let out a shaky breath. If I had told you, it would have broken you. I stiffened. Don't act like I'm wrong, she continued. You were all in, Ethan. You loved me. If I had told you I was cheating on you with someone else, someone who wasn't even Jake, you wouldn't have walked away. You would have tried to fix it. My stomach twisted, because she wasn't wrong. The me from back then? The one who thought Rachel was his entire world. He would have tried to fix it. He would have begged. And that's why she had lied. Not just to protect herself, but because she knew I loved her too much to let go. Until she forced my hand. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Who was it? Rachel hesitated. Then, softly, "You don't need to know." My grip tightened around the phone. "Rachel, you don't need to know," she repeated, firmer this time. "Because it doesn't matter anymore. He's not in my life. He was never in my life. It was just a mistake." My jaw clenched. Just a mistake. That's what she had always called things when she didn't want to take responsibility. Sleeping with Jake? A mistake. Lying about the pregnancy? A mistake. I had spent years thinking I had been the fool, that I was the one who had missed the signs. But now I realized Rachel had never really known what she wanted. And people like that, they burned everything around them, until there was nothing left. I exhaled slowly. "I'm done, Rachel." She swallowed hard. "I know. I mean really done." I let the words settle. "So if you were hoping this would be some kind of closure, here it is. I don't hate you anymore. I don't love you anymore. I don't feel anything for you anymore." Rachel made a small noise, a shaky exhale, almost like she was about to cry. I didn't wait for her to speak. I ended the call. And just like that, Rachel was gone. A week later, Lauren and I were sitting on our balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She sipped her wine, giving me a sideways glance. "So?" I took a deep breath. The weight in my chest was finally gone. "She was never the person I thought she was," I admitted. "And I was never the person she needed." Lauren smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Yeah." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she nudged me. "So, what now?" I thought about that. Then I looked at her. The woman who had never lied to me, never made me question my worth, never made me feel like I had to fight for her love. And I smiled. "Now." I leaned in, kissing her softly. "Now, we live." And this time, I meant it.